Anxiety lives in the space between what is and what we fear might be. It stretches across the distance from this moment to imagined futures that may never arrive. The ancient Stoics understood this. They understood that anxiety is born not from the world itself, but from our relationship with the world, from the way our minds reach forward into time, grasping at shadows, trying to control what cannot yet be touched. Tonight, as you rest, as your body settles and your breath slows, we'll explore together what these ancient philosophers discovered about the anxious mind. We'll move slowly through their insights, letting each idea unfold gently, without hurry, without pressure. There's nowhere to go, nothing to achieve. Simply rest, and let these thoughts drift through your awareness like clouds across a quiet sky. The Stoics were practical philosophers. They didn't sit in ivory towers contemplating abstract ideas disconnected from life. They lived in the world. Some were slaves, like Epictetus. Some were emperors, like Marcus Aurelius. Some were wealthy advisors, like Seneca, navigating the dangerous politics of Rome. They knew anxiety intimately. They knew what it meant to fear loss, to worry about the future, to feel the grip of uncertainty tightening around the chest. And yet, they found peace, not by escaping their circumstances, not by controlling every variable of life, but by understanding something fundamental about the nature of anxiety itself. They discovered that anxiety is not something that happens to us from the outside. It's something we create, moment by moment, through the way we think about our lives. This doesn't mean anxiety isn't real. It is real. The racing heart, the tight chest, the spinning thoughts, the sleepless nights, these are real experiences. But the Stoics recognize that these experiences arise from judgments we make, from beliefs we hold, from the stories we tell ourselves about what's happening and what might happen. Let's rest with this idea for a moment. Anxiety arises from within. It's generated by our own minds, by the way we interpret events, by the meaning we assign to circumstances. This might sound like bad news at first, but actually, it's the most liberating insight possible, because if anxiety comes from within, from our own thinking, then we have the power to change it. We're not helpless victims of an anxious world. We're participants in creating our own inner experience. The Stoics weren't suggesting this would be easy. They knew that changing our thinking, shifting our perspective, requires practice, patience, and time. It's not about positive thinking or forcing ourselves to see the bright side. It's about something deeper, something more honest. It's about learning to see reality clearly, without the distortions that anxiety creates. Imagine anxiety as a fog that settles over the landscape of your life. Everything becomes obscured, uncertain, threatening. Shapes that might be harmless appear dangerous in the mist. The future looms like an impenetrable wall of gray. The Stoic approach is like waiting patiently for that fog to lift, not by fighting it, not by panicking within it, but by understanding that fog is just fog. It's not the landscape itself. Beneath it, reality remains what it always was. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the heart of the Stoic approach to anxiety. We spend so much energy trying to control external circumstances, trying to make the world safe, trying to prevent bad things from happening. And this is exhausting. It's impossible. The more we try to control everything around us, the more anxious we become, because we constantly confront our own powerlessness. But we do have power. We have power over our minds. We have power over how we interpret events, how we respond to circumstances, what we choose to value, where we place our attention. This is real power. This is the only reliable power we have in life. And it's enough. Let's explore this slowly. Let's let it sink in gently. You don't need to grasp at it or hold it tightly. Just let the idea rest in your awareness. You have power over your mind. Not complete power perhaps, not perfect control, but enough power to choose, again and again, how you meet each moment. The Stoics made a crucial distinction, one that changes everything when you truly understand it. They divided all of existence into two categories: things we can control and things we cannot control. This is sometimes called the dichotomy of control. and it's the foundation of Stoic practice. What can we control? Our own actions, our own thoughts, our own choices, our own character. We can control how we respond to events. We can control what we value. We can control where we direct our attention. We can control our effort, our intentions, our interpretations. What can't we control? Almost everything else. We can't control other people's actions or thoughts. We can't control the past. We can't control most of what happens in the future. We can't control the weather, the economy, politics, illness, death. We can't control whether we succeed or fail at external goals, because success and failure depend on factors beyond our power. This distinction seems simple, but it's revolutionary, because once you truly internalize it, anxiety begins to lose its grip. Anxiety thrives on the confusion between these categories. We feel anxious when we try to control things that aren't in our control. We worry about whether someone will like us, whether we'll get the job, whether the weather will cooperate, whether we'll get sick, whether our plans will work out. All of this worry is trying to control the uncontrollable. It's mental energy poured into an impossible task, and it's exhausting. It creates a constant state of tension because we're always confronting our own powerlessness while simultaneously refusing to accept it. The Stoic approach is different. It asks us to release our grip on everything outside our control, not because we don't care, not because these things don't matter, but because gripping them creates suffering without changing outcomes. We can prefer things to go well. We can work toward good outcomes, but we hold these preferences lightly, knowing that the final result isn't up to us alone. Imagine holding a bird in your hand. If you grip it too tightly, trying to control it, you'll crush it. If you hold it too loosely, it might fly away. But if you hold it gently, with an open hand, the bird might stay, or it might fly. Either way, you haven't harmed it, and you haven't harmed yourself through desperate grasping. This is how the Stoics suggest we hold our preferences about external things, gently, with an open hand, accepting that outcomes will be what they will be, regardless of how tightly we try to hold on. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave, taught his students this principle with stark clarity. He said, "Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing." Think about that list. Your body isn't fully within your power. It ages. It gets sick. It's subject to forces beyond your control. Your property can be lost or stolen. Your reputation depends on what others think. Your position in society can change. These are all things we typically worry about, sometimes obsessively, yet they're not truly in our control. What is in your control is deeper and more reliable. Your character, your choices, your responses, the person you're becoming. These are yours. These can't be taken from you by external circumstances. You might lose everything else, but you can't lose your ability to choose your response, to maintain your integrity, to align with your values. This is where real strength lives. This is where peace lives. When you stop trying to control what you can't control, and you start focusing on what you can control, anxiety begins to dissolve. Not all at once, not permanently, but gradually, gently, it loosens its grip. Let's sit with this for a while. Let's let it become more than an idea. Let's let it seep into your understanding like water into soil. You are lying here, resting. Your body is settling. Your breath is moving. And somewhere in your mind perhaps there's anxiety about something. Something in the future maybe. Or something from the past that you can't change. Ask yourself gently, is this thing within my control? Not, can I influence it? But, is it truly within my control? If the answer is no, then worrying about it is like trying to change the weather with your thoughts. It won't work. It will only exhaust you. If the answer is yes, if it's something within your control, your own actions, your own choices, your own character, then anxiety isn't necessary either. Because if it's within your control, you can address it. You can make a choice. You can take an action. You don't need to worry. You need to act when the time comes to act. The Stoics understood that anxiety often arises from a kind of temporal confusion. We're anxious about things that haven't happened yet. We're anxious about things that might never happen. We rehearse disasters in our minds, playing out terrible scenarios, feeling the fear as if these imagined events were real and present. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind is troubled by nothing except its own judgments, not by events themselves, but by our judgments about events." And when we're anxious, we're judging that something terrible is about to happen, or might happen, or could happen. We're living in a future that doesn't exist, suffering from problems we don't actually have. This is a curious form of suffering. We make ourselves miserable now because of something that might make us miserable later. We double our suffering. We suffer in advance, and then, if the feared thing actually happens, we suffer again. And often, the feared thing never happens at all. We've suffered for nothing. Seneca wrote about this extensively. He observed how much of our lives we waste in anxiety about the future. He wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The things we dread," he noticed, "rarely come to pass in the form we imagine. And when difficulties do arise, they're usually not as devastating as we feared. We discover we can handle them. We adapt. We continue. But the anticipatory anxiety, the dread, the constant worry, this is often worse than the actual events we're worrying about. We torture ourselves with our own thoughts, creating elaborate scenarios of doom, feeling the emotions as if these scenarios were real. The Stoic approach asks us to return to the present moment, not as a technique or a trick, but as a recognition of where life actually happens. Life happens now. This moment is the only moment we ever truly have. The future is unknown and unknowable. It doesn't exist yet. It's a mental construction, a projection. This doesn't mean we shouldn't plan or prepare. The Stoics weren't advocating reckless spontaneity or refusing to think about the future. They planned, they prepared, they took prudent action, but they didn't confuse planning with worrying. Planning is thinking about the future in order to act wisely in the present. Worrying is thinking about the future in order to suffer in the present. There's a vast difference between these two activities, though they can feel similar in the mind. Planning is calm, rational, focused on what's within your control. It asks, what can I do now to prepare? Worrying is anxious, repetitive, focused on what you can't control. It asks, what if something terrible happens? When you find yourself worrying, you can ask, is this planning or is this worrying? Am I solving a problem or am I spinning in circles? If you're spinning, if you're just rehearsing fears without taking action, then you can gently redirect your attention. You can return to the present. You can focus on what's actually here, now, in this moment. And what's here now, in this moment? You're lying down, resting, you're breathing, your body is supported. The present moment, when you return to it fully, is almost always okay. It's almost always bearable. The anxiety exists in the gap between now and later, between here and there, between what is and what might be. Close that gap by returning to now, not by forcing it, not by fighting your thoughts, but by gently, repeatedly, kindly, bringing your attention back to what's actually happening. The breath moving, the body resting, the sounds around you, the sensation of being alive. Right now, in this moment, the Stoics practiced something they called negative visualization, though that name makes it sound more pessimistic than it actually is. They would imagine loss, hardship, difficulty, not to torture themselves, but to prepare themselves. They would think about losing the things they valued, about facing the challenges they feared, not with dread, but with acceptance. This practice served several purposes. First, it helped them appreciate what they had. When Marcus Aurelius would imagine losing his loved ones, he didn't do it to feel sad. He did it to remind himself that everyone he loved was temporary, mortal, precious. This made him value them more deeply in the present. It made him less likely to take them for granted. Second, it prepared them emotionally for actual loss. By contemplating difficulty in advance, they built a kind of psychological resilience. When hard things happened, they weren't shocked. They weren't thrown completely off balance. They had already, in their imagination, considered this possibility. They had already practiced accepting it. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it helped them realize that they could survive what they feared. In their imagination, they would lose everything, face every fear, and then they would imagine themselves continuing, adapting, finding a way forward. This taught them that they were more resilient than they believed, that losing external things, while painful, wouldn't destroy their essential self. This might seem counterintuitive. Why imagine bad things? Doesn't that increase anxiety? But actually, when done with the right spirit, it decreases anxiety, because anxiety thrives on the unknown, on the vague sense that something terrible might happen and we couldn't bear it. Negative visualization makes the feared thing concrete and shows us that we could, in fact, bear it. It's like exposure therapy. By approaching our fears gradually, in imagination first, we reduce their power over us. We discover that the fear of the thing is often worse than the thing itself. We discover that we're stronger than we think. But this practice must be done gently, with wisdom. It's not about dwelling in pessimism or creating new anxieties. It's about honest acknowledgement. Everything you have, you will lose. Everything you love is temporary. This is not pessimism, it's reality. And denying this reality doesn't protect us from it. It just makes us more fragile, more anxious, because we're always trying to maintain an illusion of permanence in an impermanent world. When you accept impermanence deeply, when you accept that loss is inevitable, something shifts. You hold things more lightly, you appreciate them more deeply. You're less anxious about losing them, because you've already accepted that loss is part of having them. You can love freely, knowing that love includes grief. You can live fully, knowing that life includes death. This acceptance doesn't make loss painless. The Stoics weren't advocating for emotional numbness. They felt grief, fear, sadness. Marcus Aurelius mourned deeply when his children died. Seneca wrote movingly about the pain of losing friends, but they didn't add to their natural grief by railing against reality, by insisting that things should be different than they are. There's a phrase from Epictetus that captures this perfectly. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. This is radical acceptance, not passive resignation, not giving up, but accepting reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. So much anxiety comes from this conflict between how we want things to be and how they actually are. We create a constant friction in our minds, a constant resistance to reality. We think, this shouldn't be happening, this isn't fair, this isn't right. And we're correct perhaps. It shouldn't be happening. It isn't fair. It isn't right. But it is happening. That's the reality. Fighting against reality with our thoughts doesn't change reality. It only makes us suffer more. It's like arguing with gravity while falling. The argument won't slow your fall. It will just make the fall more distressing. The Stoic approach is to accept what is, fully, and then ask, given that this is reality, how can I respond with wisdom and virtue? What's within my control now? What choice can I make? This shifts you from victim to agent. You're no longer passively suffering something that shouldn't be happening. You're actively responding to what is happening. This is empowering. This reduces anxiety, because you're no longer helpless. You're no longer waiting for reality to change so you can feel okay. You're finding your power within reality as it is. Let's think about control from another angle. We believe that controlling external circumstances will make us safe, will protect us from anxiety. If we can just arrange everything perfectly, if we can anticipate every problem, prevent every danger, then we'll be okay. Then we can relax. But this never works. There's always something else to worry about. There's always another threat, another uncertainty, another thing that could go wrong. The project of making yourself safe by controlling the external world is infinite. It can never be completed. There will always be more to control, more to fear, more to protect against. This is exhausting, and it's based on a misunderstanding. Real safety, real peace, doesn't come from controlling the external world. It comes from cultivating internal strength, internal stability. It comes from knowing that whatever happens, you have the resources within yourself to respond, to adapt, to continue. The Stoics called this the inner citadel. Imagine your mind as a fortress, a protected place that external circumstances can't invade unless you open the gates. Other people can't disturb your peace unless you give them that power. Events can't destroy your tranquility unless you interpret them as catastrophic. This doesn't mean you're invulnerable to pain, Life will hurt. Loss hurts. Disappointment hurts. Physical pain hurts. The inner citadel doesn't protect you from natural human emotions, but it protects you from adding unnecessary suffering to natural pain. It protects you from the anxious spinning, the catastrophic thinking, the despair that makes difficult situations unbearable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. At any moment, you have the power to change your relationship with what's happening. Not the external event, but your internal response." This is challenging to truly understand, because we're so accustomed to believing that external events cause our emotions directly. Someone insults us, and we feel hurt. We lose something we value, and we feel sad. It seems obvious that the external event caused the emotion, but the Stoics argued that there's always an intermediate step, a moment of interpretation, of judgment. The insult doesn't hurt us. Our judgment that the insult matters, that it reflects something true about us, that the person's opinion is important. These judgments create the hurt. The loss doesn't make us sad. Our judgment that we can't be okay without what we lost, that the loss is catastrophic, that we'll never recover. These judgments create the excessive sadness, the despair. This is subtle but crucial, because if events cause emotions directly, we're helpless. We're at the mercy of whatever happens to us. But if our judgments about events create our emotions, then we have agency. We can examine our judgments. We can question them. We can, with practice, change them. This isn't about denying reality or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about accuracy. It's about seeing clearly. Often our anxious judgments are inaccurate. We catastrophize. We imagine the worst. We tell ourselves we can't handle something when, in fact, we probably can. Let's be clear and gentle about this. You're not to blame for your anxiety. You're not doing something wrong by feeling anxious. Anxiety is a natural human experience, and it arises from many sources, including biological factors that aren't about judgment or interpretation at all. The Stoic approach isn't about judgment or self-criticism. It's not about beating yourself up for having anxiety or insisting that you should be able to think your way out of it. It's about understanding, gradually and gently, that you have more power than you might believe, that your thoughts and interpretations shape your experience, and that you can, with practice, learn to think more clearly, more accurately, more helpfully. This is a practice. It takes time. It takes patience. The Stoics spent their entire lives working on this. They didn't perfect it. They didn't eliminate all anxiety. They just learned, gradually, to meet their anxiety with wisdom, to question their catastrophic thoughts, to return to what was within their control. And you can do the same. Not perfectly, not all at once, but gradually, gently, with self-compassion and patience. Each time you notice anxiety arising, you have an opportunity to practice. You can pause. You can ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Is this fear based on reality or imagination? Is this within my control? What's actually happening right now? These questions aren't meant to dismiss your anxiety. They're meant to bring clarity. Sometimes the fear is justified. Sometimes something genuinely difficult is happening or about to happen. But even then, even when the fear is rational, anxiety, the spinning, the catastrophizing, the sense of helplessness, isn't helpful. Clarity is helpful. Focused action is helpful. Acceptance is helpful. The Stoics distinguish between fear and anxiety in an interesting way. Fear, they suggested, is a natural response to immediate danger. If a wild animal is charging at you, fear is appropriate. It mobilizes your body to respond. This is healthy, adaptive fear. But anxiety is different. Anxiety is fear extended into time, fear about things that aren't happening now, fear about things that might never happen. Anxiety is fear without a specific object or threat to respond to. It's generalized, chronic, unfocused, and this kind of fear isn't helpful. It doesn't mobilize you to respond effectively. It paralyzes you or scatters your energy. When the Stoics talked about managing fear, they weren't suggesting you shouldn't feel afraid when there's real danger. They were suggesting you shouldn't live in a constant state of anxious anticipation about dangers that aren't present. Think about how much of your anxiety is about immediate, present danger versus how much is about imagined future scenarios. Almost always, when you're anxious, You're actually safe in the present moment. The threat exists in your imagination of the future, and your body is responding to that imagined threat as if it were real and present. This is exhausting. Your body is in a constant state of mobilization for a threat that isn't actually here. No wonder anxiety is so draining. You're running from a predator that exists only in your mind. The antidote is to return, again and again, to the present moment, to reality as it actually is, not as you fear it might become. To notice that right now, in this moment, you're okay. You're breathing. You're alive. Whatever you're afraid of hasn't happened yet, and maybe it never will. And even if it does happen, you'll face it when it happens. In that future moment, you'll be present in that moment, dealing with that reality. You don't need to face it now. You don't need to suffer it in advance. Seneca wrote extensively about this. He observed that we humans have a strange tendency to suffer our entire lives for things that might happen, rehearsing tragedies that never come to pass. He wrote, "There are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He encouraged people to ask themselves, what am I actually dealing with right now? Not tomorrow, not next week, not in some imagined future, but right now? And the answer, he found, was usually that things were manageable in the present. The suffering was coming from the projection into the future. This is a practice you can do right now as you rest. Ask yourself, what am I actually dealing with in this present moment? Not your worries about tomorrow, not your concerns about next week, but right now, right here, in this moment. The answer might be, I'm lying down, breathing, listening to a voice, resting. That's all. That's what you're actually dealing with. The rest is imagination. The rest is story. The rest is projection. And in this present moment, you can choose to rest. You can choose to let the imagined futures dissolve. They'll return, probably. The mind likes to wander into future scenarios, but each time it wanders, you can gently return. Present moment, breath, body, rest. This isn't about forcing anything. It's about noticing. When you notice you've wandered into anxious future thinking, you can smile gently at your mind's habit and return to now. No judgment, no criticism, just a gentle return, again and again. The Stoics talked about living in accordance with nature. This phrase can sound abstract or vague, but it has practical meaning. They meant accepting the nature of reality, including human nature, including your own nature, not fighting against what is, but working with it. Part of nature is change. Everything changes. Nothing is permanent. This is sometimes called impermanence, and it's a fundamental principle in many philosophical traditions, not just Stoicism. The universe is in constant flux. Everything that comes into being passes away. Everything that begins, ends. We know this intellectually, but we resist it emotionally. We want things to stay the same. We want the good times to last forever. We want to prevent the bad times from ever happening. We want to freeze the world in a pleasant configuration and keep it that way. But this is impossible. It's fighting against nature, and fighting against nature creates suffering, creates anxiety, because we're constantly aware, at some level, that the permanence we're trying to create is an illusion. We're constantly afraid of change, of loss, of endings. The Stoic approach is to accept change as natural and inevitable, not to like it necessarily, but to accept it, to expect it, to prepare for it, to know that whatever we have now, we won't have forever, to know that whatever we're experiencing now will pass, whether we want it to or not. This acceptance brings a kind of peace, not the peace of getting what you want, but the peace of not fighting against reality. When you accept that everything changes, you stop exhausting yourself trying to prevent change. You can appreciate what you have while you have it, knowing it's temporary. You can endure what's difficult, knowing it's temporary too. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly of impermanence. He would think about how everything he saw, people, buildings, empires, would eventually be gone, not to depress himself, but to help himself appreciate the present and maintain perspective. If everything is temporary, then no single moment or event carries ultimate significance. You can hold things lightly. This helps with anxiety because anxiety often comes from believing that certain things must go a certain way, that certain outcomes are necessary for your well-being. But if you accept that everything is temporary anyway, that nothing lasts, then specific outcomes become less critical. You can prefer things to go well, but you're not dependent on them going well. You can see your life as a wave in the ocean. The wave rises, it exists for a moment, and then it returns to the ocean. While it's a wave, it might prefer to be a big wave, a beautiful wave, a wave that lasts a long time. But these preferences don't change the fact that it's a wave. And waves rise and fall. That's what waves do. Your anxiety about the wave falling doesn't keep it from falling. Your desperate desire for the wave to last forever doesn't extend its existence. But your acceptance of the waves. Nature allows you to appreciate the wave while it exists, without the suffering that comes from denying its temporary nature. This is living in accordance with nature, accepting what you are, temporary, changing, impermanent, and living fully within that reality, not fighting against it. Let's think about worry specifically. Worry is a particular kind of anxiety. It's repetitive, it's focused on specific scenarios, and it feels productive. When we worry, it feels like we're doing something. We're preparing, we're planning, we're staying vigilant. We tell ourselves that worrying helps us prevent bad things from happening. But does it? The Stoics would ask you to examine this belief carefully. Does worrying actually prevent problems? Or does it just make you feel terrible while problems either happen or don't happen, based on factors beyond your control? Sometimes worry masquerades as planning, but there's a clear difference. Planning is time-limited. You think about a potential problem, you make a plan to address it or prevent it, and then you're done. You've taken action, and now you can move on. Worry, on the other hand, is endless. You think about the problem over and over, often without making any actual plans or taking any actual action. You just replay the feared scenario, feeling the anxiety, without moving toward a solution. If you find yourself worrying, ask, is there an action I can take right now to address this concern? If yes, then take the action or plan to take it at the appropriate time. If no, if there's nothing you can actually do, then worrying is just suffering without purpose. Seneca wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future events is miserable." Future events are beyond our control. We can prepare reasonably. We can make wise choices. But ultimately, the future will unfold as it will. Anxiety about it doesn't change it. It only makes us miserable in the present. He suggested that we should focus our mental energy on the present, on what we're doing now, on the choices we're making now, not with grim determination, but with engaged presence. When you're fully present with what you're doing, there's no space for worry. Worry requires you to split your attention between now and later, between here and there. As you rest now, you might notice worry arising, thoughts about tomorrow, about next week, about things you need to do or problems you need to solve. These thoughts are natural. The mind likes to plan, to anticipate, but you can notice when planning becomes worrying, when thinking about the future becomes anxious spinning. And when you notice this, you can gently ask, can I do anything about this right now? If no, then you can let it go. Not suppress it, not fight it, but simply acknowledge, there's nothing I can do about this right now, and return your attention to the present, to your breath, to your body resting, to the sounds around you. If you do this kindly, without judgment, it becomes easier over time. Your mind learns that it doesn't need to solve every problem immediately, that it's okay to rest, that the future will come when it comes, and you'll deal with it then. The Stoics also talked about the importance of focusing on the process rather than the outcome. This is another way of addressing anxiety, because so much anxiety is about outcomes. We worry about whether things will work out. We worry about success or failure. We worry about what will happen, but outcomes are not entirely in our control. You can work hard toward a goal and still fail due to factors beyond your control. You can do everything right and still have things go wrong. This is the nature of reality. Outcomes depend on many variables, most of which you can't control. What you can control is your process, your effort, your intentions, your character. You can control whether you approach your work with diligence, whether you treat others with kindness, whether you act with integrity. These are within your control, regardless of outcomes. When you focus on the process, on doing what you believe is right and doing it well, anxiety decreases, because you're no longer dependent on external results that you can't control. Your sense of success or failure, your sense of worth, comes from your own actions, your own character, and these are yours. These are reliable. Epictetus taught his students to redefine success in this way. Don't define success by external outcomes, wealth, fame, status, others' approval. Define success by internal qualities, virtue, wisdom, kindness, courage, because external outcomes can be taken from you by fortune, but your character is yours alone. This is deeply liberating when you really internalize it. It means you can't truly fail in the most important sense, as long as you're acting with integrity. External setbacks aren't failures, they're just circumstances. The only real failure is the failure to act according to your values, to be the kind of person you want to be. And that's always within your control. You can always choose your character. You can always choose to respond with virtue, even in difficult circumstances. Especially in difficult circumstances. That's when character is most tested and most revealed. Marcus Aurelius faced enormous challenges. He ruled during a time of plague, war, economic trouble, and political conspiracy. He had every reason to be anxious, stressed, overwhelmed. Yet his writings reveal a man working constantly to maintain inner peace, to focus on what was within his control, to accept what was beyond it. He didn't always succeed. He struggled, but he kept practicing. He kept returning to these principles. He kept reminding himself, focus on your own actions, accept external events, maintain virtue, remember that everything is impermanent. And this practice sustained him. It allowed him to rule wisely, to endure hardship, to maintain his humanity in inhuman circumstances. Not because he was superhuman, but because he had a philosophy that kept him grounded, that reminded him what mattered, that gave him a framework for understanding his experience. You can use this same framework. You don't need to be an emperor facing plagues and wars. Your challenges might be smaller in scale, but they're still real to you. Your anxiety might be about everyday things, work, relationships, health, money. But the principles are the same. Focus on what you can control. Accept what you can't. Live according to your values. Remember that everything is temporary. Return to the present moment. Treat yourself with compassion. Practice patiently over time. This is the Stoic approach to anxiety. Not a quick fix, not a magic solution, but a sustainable practice. A way of thinking and living that gradually reduces the grip of anxiety and creates more space for peace. Let's talk about catastrophic thinking, because this is one of the main ways anxiety manifests. When we're anxious, we tend to imagine the worst possible outcome. We think, what if everything goes wrong? What if I fail completely? What if this is a disaster? This is natural. Our brains evolved to watch for danger, to anticipate threats. In a dangerous environment, it's better to assume the worst and be pleasantly surprised than to assume the best and be eaten by a predator. So, we have a negativity bias built into our thinking. But in modern life, this bias often works against us. Most of the things we worry about aren't life-threatening, and imagining the worst-case scenario doesn't protect us. It just makes us suffer in advance. The Stoics had a practice for dealing with catastrophic thinking. They would ask, what's the worst that could actually happen? And then they would consider whether they could survive that worst-case scenario. Usually they realized they could. It might be difficult, painful, challenging, but they would continue. They would adapt. They would find a way forward. This practice takes the fear out of the shadows and looks at it directly. Often, when we do this, we realize that even the worst-case scenario isn't as catastrophic as the vague, undefined dread we've been feeling. We realize we're stronger and more resilient than we believed. Let's try this gently. If there's something you're anxious about, ask yourself, what's the worst that could realistically happen? Not the most dramatic, unlikely scenario, but the worst realistic outcome. And then ask, could I survive that? Would I find a way to continue? The answer is almost always yes. You've survived everything that's happened to you so far. You've faced difficulties before and you're still here. You've adapted, learned, grown. You would do so again. This doesn't mean the feared outcome wouldn't be hard. It might be very hard, but you would get through it. And knowing that you would get through it makes it less frightening. The worst thing isn't usually, I won't survive. The worst thing is, it will be hard, and I'll have to change and adapt. And you can do that. Humans are remarkably adaptable. We can endure and adjust to circumstances we thought would be unbearable. We discover resources within ourselves that we didn't know we had. We find meaning even in difficult circumstances. The Stoics called this amor fati, love. of fate. Not just acceptance of fate, but love of it. The idea is that whatever happens to you is part of your life, part of your story, and you can embrace it, learn from it, use it to grow. This might seem extreme. How can you love difficulties, losses, pain? But amor fati doesn't mean enjoying suffering. It means accepting that suffering is part of life, and choosing to meet it with courage and find meaning in it rather than railing against it. Viktor Frankl, a 20th century CE psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, described this in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He observed that the prisoners who survived with their humanity intact were those who found meaning in their suffering, who chose their attitude even when they couldn't choose their circumstances. This is the ultimate expression of Stoic philosophy. Even in the worst possible circumstances, you have the freedom to choose your response. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control who you are in the face of what happens. This is incredibly empowering, because it means that no matter what you're anxious about, no matter what difficulties you might face, you always have this fundamental power, the power to choose your character, your attitude, your response. Anxiety tries to convince you that you're powerless, that you're at the mercy of circumstances, that if certain things happen or don't happen, you'll be destroyed. But this isn't true. You're not powerless. You have the most important power there is, the power to choose who you'll be. Let's think about other people for a moment, because so much anxiety involves other people. We worry about what others think of us. We worry about whether they'll approve or disapprove. We worry about conflicts, about disappointing people, about being judged or rejected. The Stoics had clear guidance about this. They believed that other people's opinions are not within your control, and therefore shouldn't be the basis of your peace or self-worth. You can't control whether people like you, approve of you, think well of you. You can only control your own actions and character. This is hard to accept because we're social beings. We want to be liked. We want to belong. These are natural, healthy desires. But the Stoics would say, do your best to be a good person, to act with kindness and integrity, and then let others think what they will. If you've acted well according to your own values, then you can be at peace, regardless of others' judgments. If someone misunderstands you, disapproves of you, judges you unfairly, that's their business, not yours. You can't control their thoughts or opinions. You can only control whether you act according to your own standards. This is incredibly freeing when you truly internalize it. So much anxiety dissolves when you stop trying to control others' perceptions of you. You can be yourself. You can act according to your values, and you can allow others to have their own responses, whatever those might be. Of course, you'll make mistakes. You'll act in ways you regret. And when that happens, you can acknowledge it, apologize if needed, learn from it, and move forward. But you don't need to be perfect to have worth. You don't need everyone's approval to be okay. Epictetus put it bluntly. If someone speaks badly of you, they're dealing with their own impressions, not you. If someone criticizes you unfairly, that's their problem, not yours. Your problem is only whether you've acted rightly according to your own understanding. This takes the sting out of criticism. This reduces social anxiety, because you're no longer dependent on others' approval for your sense of worth. You know who you are. You know whether you've acted with integrity, and that's enough. This doesn't mean you become arrogant or indifferent to feedback. Constructive criticism can be valuable, but there's a difference between considering feedback thoughtfully and being devastated by others' disapproval, between learning from criticism and letting it define your self-worth. The Stoic approach is to consider feedback rationally. Ask yourself, is this criticism valid? Does it point to something I should change? If yes, then you can learn from it and adjust your behavior. If no, if the criticism is unfair or based on misunderstanding, then you can let it go. You don't need to defend yourself against every criticism or convince everyone of your worth. Your worth doesn't depend on others' opinions. It depends on your character, your choices, your actions, and these are within your control. As you rest now, think about this. Think about how much energy you spend worrying about others' perceptions. What would it feel like to release that? To know that you're okay regardless of what others think? To act according to your own values and let others think what they will? This doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice. But each time you notice yourself anxious about others' opinions, you can pause and ask, is this within my control? Am I acting with integrity? If yes, then what others think is their business, not mine. And then you can return to the present moment, to what you're actually doing, to being the kind of person you want to be, regardless of the audience. The Stoics also emphasize the importance of virtue, of being a good person, of acting rightly. This might sound old-fashioned or moralistic, but it's actually deeply practical when it comes to anxiety. When you act with integrity, when you live according to your values, you have less to be anxious about. You're not worried about being found out, about your deceptions being revealed, about consequences catching up with you. You can face the world with a clear conscience. Conversely, when you act in ways that violate your own values, anxiety increases, even if others don't know what you've done. You know, and that creates internal conflict, guilt, fear of discovery. This is a heavy burden to carry. The Stoics believe that virtue is its own reward, that acting rightly feels good, creates peace, allows you to respect yourself, and that vice creates its own punishment, the anxiety, guilt, and self-loathing that come from betraying your own values. This isn't about being perfect. It's about striving to act with integrity, acknowledging when you fall short, making amends when possible, and learning from your mistakes. It's about having standards for yourself and working to meet them. When you do this, when you live in alignment with your values, anxiety decreases, because you're not creating internal conflict. You're not splitting your energy between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. You can be honest with yourself and others, and this honesty creates peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." This is simple but profound. Don't spend your life debating ethics or talking about values. Live them. Be the kind of person you respect. And in doing so, create a foundation of self-respect that anxiety can't erode. Think about the areas of your life where you might be acting in ways that conflict with your values. Maybe you're being dishonest in some way. Maybe you're avoiding necessary difficult conversations. Maybe you're doing work that doesn't align with your principles. Maybe you're treating people in ways you wouldn't want to be treated. These conflicts create anxiety. They create a sense that something isn't right, that you're not okay. And no amount of external success or approval can eliminate this internal discord. The solution isn't to judge yourself harshly. It's to gently, honestly acknowledge where you're out of alignment, and then take steps, gradually, to come back into alignment, to act more according to your values, to be more honest, to treat people better, to do work that matters to you. This is the path to inner peace, not perfection, but integrity, not never making mistakes, but acknowledging them and learning from them, not being better than others, but being someone you can respect. And when you have this self-respect, this sense of living with integrity, anxiety has less power, because you know at a deep level that you're okay, not perfect, but doing your best, not flawless, but honest, not beyond criticism, but acting according to your own standards. This is the fortress of the mind that the Stoics talked about. This is the inner citadel. It's built not from controlling external circumstances, but from living with virtue, from aligning your actions with your values, from knowing that whatever happens externally, you're maintaining your character. Let's talk about sleep itself. Since you're resting now, perhaps trying to sleep. Anxiety and sleep have a complicated relationship. Anxiety makes it hard to sleep, and lack of sleep makes anxiety worse. It's a difficult cycle. The Stoics would approach this by accepting that sometimes you won't sleep well. Fighting with sleeplessness, becoming anxious about not sleeping, only makes it worse. If you're lying awake, you're lying awake. You can't force sleep to come, but you can rest your body, you can let your mind wander gently, you can be okay with being awake for now. Often, the anxiety about not sleeping is worse than the actual wakefulness. You think, I need to sleep or I'll be exhausted tomorrow. I must fall asleep now. But this must creates pressure, tension, which makes sleep even more elusive. The Stoic approach would be, I'd prefer to sleep, but if sleep doesn't come, I'll rest my body anyway. I'll lie here peacefully. I'll be tired tomorrow perhaps, but I've been tired before and survived. It's not ideal, but it's okay. This acceptance reduces the pressure. And, often, paradoxically, when you stop fighting for sleep, when you accept being awake, sleep comes more easily, because you've released the tension, the striving, the anxiety about not sleeping. So as you lie here now, you don't need to make yourself sleep. You're just resting. If sleep comes, wonderful. If it doesn't, that's okay too. You're giving your body a chance to rest, your mind a chance to settle, and that's enough. The same principle applies to anxious thoughts that might arise. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to push them away or criticize yourself for having them. They're just thoughts. They'll come and go like clouds across the sky of your mind. When you notice an anxious thought, you can acknowledge it gently. There's anxiety about tomorrow. There's worry about that conversation. There's fear about that problem. Just noting it, without judgment, without engagement, and then you can return your attention to something neutral. Your breath. The sensation of your body resting, the sounds around you. You're not suppressing the anxious thoughts. You're just not feeding them with attention. You're letting them be there without engaging with them. This is a practice from mindfulness meditation, but it aligns perfectly with Stoic philosophy. Both approaches recognize that you can't control what thoughts arise, but you can control where you place your sustained attention. You can choose not to follow every thought down its rabbit hole. An anxious thought arises. You notice it. You let it be. You return to the present. Another anxious thought arises. You notice it. You let it be. You return to the present. This isn't failure. This is the practice. This is how the mind gradually learns to settle. You're not trying to achieve a perfectly clear mind. You're just practicing this gentle noticing and returning again and again. And over time, the thoughts have less power. They're just thoughts. They're not truth. They're not reality. They're mental events, arising and passing away. The Stoics understood this. They knew that thoughts aren't facts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Part of that power is the power to not believe every thought you have, to question thoughts, to recognize them as interpretations rather than reality. When an anxious thought says, "This is going to be a disaster," you can recognize that as a thought, not a fact. You don't know the future. This thought is your mind's attempt to predict and protect, but it's not necessarily accurate. You can hold the thought lightly. There's a thought that this might be a disaster. Maybe. Maybe not. I don't actually know. What I do know is that right now, in this moment, I'm okay, and I'll deal with whatever comes when it comes. This kind of gentle, rational response to anxious thoughts is at the heart of Stoic practice. Not fighting the thoughts, not suppressing them, but not believing them uncritically either. Treating them as what they are, thoughts, interpretations, predictions that might or might not be accurate. And then returning to what you do know, what is actually true right now. You're breathing, you're alive, you're resting. The future hasn't happened yet. The present moment is okay. Let's think about physical symptoms of anxiety, because anxiety isn't just mental, it's deeply physical. The racing heart, the tight chest, the shallow breathing, the tension in your shoulders, the pit in your stomach. These physical sensations can be distressing, can themselves become sources of more anxiety. The Stoics didn't write much explicitly about the body's role in anxiety. They were primarily focused on the mind, but their principles still apply. You can't directly control your heart rate or your body's stress response. These are physiological processes, but you can control your reaction to these sensations. When you notice your heart racing, you can tell yourself, "This is my body responding to perceived threat. It's uncomfortable but not dangerous. My body is trying to protect me. I can let it do its thing without adding anxiety about the anxiety." When you notice shallow breathing, you can gently deepen your breath, not forcing it, not fighting with it, but encouraging it to slow and deepen. Breath is one of the few physiological processes you can partially control, and it's a bridge between mind and body. As you breathe slowly and deeply, you're sending a signal to your body that you're safe, that you can relax. The body and mind communicate constantly. When the body is tense, the mind interprets danger. When the body relaxes, the mind can calm. So you can use your body to help your mind, not by controlling everything, but by working with what you can influence. Breathing slowly, releasing tension in your muscles, resting your body in a comfortable position. These physical actions support mental peace. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, and part of that is respecting your body's needs. You need rest. You need sleep. you need nourishment, you need movement. When these basic needs aren't met, anxiety increases. Your body is stressed, and that stress affects your mind. So part of managing anxiety is basic self-care, sleeping enough, eating reasonably, moving your body, not pushing yourself beyond your limits all the time, giving yourself permission to rest, to be human, to have physical needs. This isn't weakness, this is wisdom. The Stoics were tough-minded in many ways, but they weren't foolish. They knew that humans are embodied beings, that we have physical limitations, that ignoring these limitations creates problems. Marcus Aurelius struggled with chronic illness. He wrote about the challenges of dealing with physical pain while trying to maintain mental clarity. He didn't pretend the body didn't matter. He acknowledged it mattered, and he worked to not let physical discomfort disturb his mind more than necessary. You can do the same. You can acknowledge that physical discomfort, whether it's anxiety symptoms or illness or pain, is real and challenging. And you can also recognize that you don't need to add mental suffering to physical discomfort. You can face it with acceptance rather than resistance. When your heart races with anxiety, instead of thinking, "This is terrible, I need to make it stop immediately," you can think, "This is uncomfortable, but it's temporary. My body is doing what bodies do. It will pass." This doesn't eliminate the discomfort, but it reduces the additional suffering that comes from fighting it. As you rest now, scan your body gently. Notice where you're holding tension, your jaw perhaps, your shoulders, your stomach, and see if you can release that tension, just a little, not forcing anything, just inviting your muscles to soften. And notice your breath. Is it shallow? Can you let it deepen? Gently, just encouraging it, not controlling it, allowing your body to relax, to rest, to feel safe. This physical relaxation supports the mental peace we've been exploring. Mind and body work together. When you care for your body, you support your mind. When you calm your mind, you help your body. Let's return to the concept of time, because time and anxiety are intimately connected. Anxiety lives almost entirely in time, in the future specifically. It's rare to feel anxious about something happening right now. Anxiety is about what might happen, what could happen, what we fear will happen. The Stoics were fascinated by time. They recognized that humans have a strange relationship with it. We're almost never fully present. We're either dwelling in the past, regretting, resenting, nostalgia, or projecting into the future, planning, worrying, hoping. But life only exists in the present. The past is memory. The future is imagination. The only moment you actually live is this one now. And this moment is usually okay. Even when life is difficult, this single moment, taken on its own, is usually bearable. Anxiety collapses time. It brings the feared future into the present, makes you feel it as if it's happening now. But it's not happening now. It's just a thought about the future. And that distinction is crucial. When you find yourself anxious, you can ask, am I dealing with what's happening now, or what might happen later? If it's later, you can acknowledge, that's the future. I don't know what will happen. Right now, in this moment, I'm okay. This isn't denial. It's accurate perception. Right now, as you lie here, you're okay. You're breathing, you're alive, you're safe. The things you're worried about aren't happening right now. They might happen later, or they might not. But right now, they're not happening. And if they do happen later, you'll deal with them then. In that future moment, you'll be present in that moment, facing that reality. You don't need to face it now. You don't need to experience it twice, once in anxious anticipation and once in reality. Seneca wrote that most people do not live, but prepare to live. They're so focused on the future, on what they'll do when things are better, when they've achieved their goals, when circumstances improve, that they never fully inhabit the present. They never actually live. And then life passes, and they realize they spent it all, preparing, worrying, planning, never actually being here, now, alive, present. This is what anxiety does. It steals your present by making you live in an imagined future. It takes the only moment you actually have, now, and obscures it with fears about later. The antidote is to practice presence, to return, again and again, to now, not as a technique to achieve some goal, but simply as recognition of where life actually is. Life is here. Life is now. Everything else is memory or imagination. This doesn't mean you shouldn't plan for the future. Plan reasonably. Take appropriate action and then return to the present. Live your life. Be here. Experience this moment. This is the only moment that's real. As you rest, let the future dissolve. It doesn't exist yet. It's not here. Let the past dissolve too. It's gone. It's memory. All that exists is this moment. Your body resting, your breath moving, the sounds around you, the sensation of being alive. Now, this is enough. This moment is enough. You don't need to be anywhere else or any time else. You can simply be here, now, resting. The Stoics practice something called contemplation of the sage, imagining how a wise person would handle a situation. When facing anxiety, you could ask yourself, how would a wise person respond to this? How would Marcus Aurelius handle this worry? How would Epictetus deal with this fear? This isn't about being someone else. It's about accessing your own wisdom by stepping outside your immediate emotional reaction. When you imagine how a wise person would respond, you often realize you already know what wisdom would suggest. You just need to access it beneath the anxiety. A wise person would probably respond calmly. They would focus on what they could control. They would accept what they couldn't control. They would maintain their values regardless of outcomes. They would be kind to themselves. They would see the situation clearly, without catastrophizing. You can do these things too. You might not do them perfectly, but you can move in that direction. Each time you respond to anxiety with wisdom rather than panic, you're strengthening that capacity. You're becoming gradually a wiser person yourself. This is how character develops, not through sudden transformation, but through repeated choices. Each time you choose to return to the present, rather than spiraling into future fears, you're building the habit of presence. Each time you focus on what you can control rather than what you can't, you're building the habit of agency. Over time, these habits become easier. They become more natural. Your default response shifts from anxiety to calm, from helplessness to empowerment, from resistance to acceptance. This takes practice. The Stoics were clear about this. They called their philosophy a practice, not a doctrine. It's something you do, not just something you think about. And like any practice, it requires repetition, patience, and self-compassion. When you stumble, you won't handle every situation perfectly. You'll still feel anxious sometimes. You'll still get caught up in worries and fears. This is being human. But with practice, you'll notice it sooner. You'll return to center more quickly. You'll suffer less and recover faster. And this is growth. Not perfection, but progress. Not the elimination of anxiety, but a better relationship with it. Not constant peace, but more frequent peace, and the ability to return to peace after disturbance. Let's talk about gratitude, which might seem unrelated to anxiety, but is actually deeply connected. The Stoics practiced gratitude regularly. They would reflect on what they had, what was good in their lives, what they appreciated. This wasn't about forced positivity or denying difficulties. It was about balanced perception. When you're anxious, your attention narrows to threats, to what could go wrong, to what you might lose. Gratitude widens your attention to include what's going right, what you have, what's working. Both perspectives are real. Life contains both difficulties and blessings. Anxiety highlights one side of this reality. Gratitude highlights the other. Neither is the complete picture, but gratitude provides balance. When you practice gratitude, you're reminding yourself of what you already have. This reduces anxiety about what you might lose or what you think you need. You realize you already have much to appreciate. You already have enough, in many ways. This doesn't mean you shouldn't want things to improve or work toward goals, but it means your well-being doesn't depend entirely on future achievements. You can be okay now, even while working toward something better. Marcus Aurelius practiced gratitude in his meditations. Even as emperor, facing enormous challenges, he would remind himself to be grateful for his teachers, his family, his own capacity for reason. He wasn't pretending everything was perfect. He was acknowledging what was good alongside what was difficult. You can do this too. Right now, as you rest, you might think of a few things you're grateful for. Small things, probably. Your bed, your breath, safety, warmth, maybe people you love, maybe simple pleasures, maybe just being alive. Nothing dramatic, just simple appreciation for what's here, what you have. what's okay. This shifts your mind away from what you're afraid of losing toward what you already possess. It grounds you in what's real and present rather than what's feared and future. Gratitude doesn't eliminate anxiety, but it provides perspective. It reminds you that life isn't only threats and dangers. There's also beauty, connection, simple goodness. And focusing on this, even briefly, creates space for your nervous system to calm. The Stoics believed in the interconnectedness of all things. They saw themselves as part of a larger whole, part of nature, part of humanity. This perspective can help with anxiety because it reduces the sense of isolation, the feeling that you're facing everything alone. You're not alone. You're part of the human community, connected to others through shared experience. Everyone feels anxious sometimes. Everyone struggles. Everyone faces uncertainty and fear. This is part of the human condition, not your personal failure. When you recognize this, anxiety becomes less shameful, less isolating. It's not proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that you're human, feeling what humans feel, and you can draw on the wisdom of others who faced anxiety before you. The Stoics, certainly, but also countless others throughout history and in your own life. People have faced far worse than what you're facing and found their way through. This is evidence of human resilience, and you share in that resilience. You're part of this human story, this ongoing experiment in living with uncertainty and finding meaning despite it. You're not starting from nothing. You have the accumulated wisdom of generations to draw upon. You have your own experience and strength. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself of this. What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. He saw himself as part of a larger community, and this gave him perspective. His individual concerns were real but also relative. He was part of something bigger than himself. You too are part of something bigger. Your life is woven into countless other lives. Your actions matter not just to you but to others. This can be comforting. You're not alone. You're connected, supported, part of an ongoing human journey. As you rest, you might feel this connection. Even alone in your room, you're part of a vast web of relationships, influences, shared humanity. Others are resting too, perhaps listening to similar thoughts, working with similar struggles. You're all in this together, this challenge of being human, of living with uncertainty, of finding peace. Let's think about acceptance one more time, from a slightly different angle. Acceptance doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean giving up or not trying to improve things. Acceptance means acknowledging reality as it is right now, as the starting point for any action you might take. You can't change something you won't acknowledge. If you're in denial about a problem, you can't solve it. If you're resisting reality, insisting it shouldn't be this way, you're stuck. Acceptance allows you to move forward. It says, this is how things are. Now what can I do? This is empowering. This turns you from victim to agent. You're not helplessly suffering something that shouldn't be happening. You're actively responding to what is happening. Anxiety often comes from this resistance to reality. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. This is wrong. And maybe it is wrong. Maybe it is unfair. But it's still happening. Resistance doesn't change that. It just makes you suffer more. Acceptance allows you to stop fighting reality and start working with it. To ask, given that this is the situation, what's the wise response? What's within my control? How can I move forward? This is what the Stoics meant by living in accordance with nature, not accepting terrible behavior or injustice, but accepting the reality of the situation so you can respond effectively. Acceptance as a starting point for wise action, not as an end point of resignation. When you're anxious about something, you can practice this kind of acceptance. I'm anxious about this thing. That's the reality. I don't have to like it, but I can accept that this is what I'm feeling right now. And then, given that I'm feeling anxious, what's the wise response? What can I control? What action can I take, or what can I let go? This transforms anxiety from something that happens to you into something you're working with. You're no longer a passive victim of your anxiety. You're an active participant in your own experience, choosing how to respond. And often the wise response is to return to the present, to focus on what you can control, to let go of what you can't, to take care of yourself, to act according to your values, to be patient with yourself as you practice these principles. The Stoics were remarkably self-compassionate, though they didn't use that language. They recognized that philosophy is a practice, that they would make mistakes, that they wouldn't live up to their ideals all the time. Marcus Aurelius would chide himself in his journals, but also encourage himself, remind himself to begin again each day. You can do the same. When you notice you've been caught up in anxiety, spiraling in worry, you don't need to judge yourself harshly. You can simply notice, I've been anxious, and gently return to center. Begin again. Return to the present. Focus on what you can control. This gentle returning, again and again, is the practice. Not getting it right every time, but returning when you notice you've drifted. Not perfection, but persistent, patient effort. And over time, this practice changes you. Not all at once, but gradually. You become someone who notices anxiety sooner, someone who returns to center more quickly, someone who suffers less from the anxious mind's tricks, someone who lives more peacefully, more present, more wisely. This is the promise of Stoic philosophy. Not that life will become easy, not that you'll never feel anxious, but that you'll develop the capacity to meet life's challenges with greater wisdom, peace, and resilience. As we've explored these ideas together, you've been resting, your body has been settling, your breath has perhaps slowed, the words have been flowing through your awareness, some sticking, some passing by. And that's perfect. That's exactly right. You don't need to remember everything. You don't need to grasp at these ideas or hold them tightly. They're here for you when you need them. You can return to them. They're like seeds planted in your mind, and they'll grow in their own time. For now, you can simply rest. Let your body be supported. Let your mind wander where it will. Let these ideas drift in the background of your awareness, like a gentle stream. You've learned that anxiety is created by your mind's relationship with time and uncertainty, that it arises from trying to control what can't be controlled, that it's fed by catastrophic thinking and resistance to reality. And you've learned that there's another way, the Stoic way. Focus on what you can control, accept what you can't, return to the present moment, live according to your values, hold preferences lightly, practice gratitude, connect with shared humanity. These aren't just ideas. They're practices, ways of being, ways of meeting life, and they're available to you, always. Whenever you feel anxiety rising, you can remember, what's within my control? What's happening right now? Am I accepting reality or fighting it? Am I living by my values? These simple questions can guide you back to peace. Not perfectly, not permanently, but again and again, each time you ask them. The Stoics knew that we need reminders. They knew that wisdom isn't something you learn once and then have forever. It's something you practice daily, sometimes moment by moment. They wrote journals, they talked with friends, they studied philosophy regularly, all ways of reminding themselves of what they knew but kept forgetting. You can do the same. You can return to these ideas regularly. You can remind yourself of the Stoic principles when anxiety arises. You can practice patiently, over time, and gradually, you'll notice changes. Not dramatic transformations overnight, but subtle shifts. You'll catch yourself spiraling into worry and return to the present a little sooner. You'll notice yourself trying to control what can't be controlled and redirect your energy. You'll find yourself less devastated by setbacks because you've been practicing acceptance. These small changes compound over time. They accumulate into a different way of being, a calmer, wiser, more peaceful way of moving through life. This is what the Stoics discovered. This is what they practiced. And this is what they're offering you across 2,000 years. Their wisdom still relevant, still helpful, still true. Because human nature hasn't changed. We still feel anxious. We still struggle with uncertainty. We still try to control what can't be controlled. The circumstances of life are different now, but the fundamental human challenges are the same, and the solutions are the same too. Return to what you can control. Accept what you can't. Live in the present. Maintain your character. Practice virtue. Hold things lightly. Be grateful. Connect with others. Simple principles, but profound in their effects when you actually live them. As you continue to rest, you might notice that your mind has quieted somewhat. The act of listening, of considering these ideas, has perhaps created some space between you and your anxious thoughts. You've been observing anxiety rather than being consumed by it. This is the power of philosophy, of contemplation. It creates distance. It allows you to step back and see your experience more clearly. You're not just your anxiety. You're the awareness that notices anxiety. You're the space in which anxiety arises and passes. This might sound abstract, but it's actually very practical. When you identify less with your anxious thoughts, when you see them as events in your mind rather than truth, they have less power. They're just thoughts. They're not reality. They're not you. The Stoics understood this. They practiced observing their own minds, noticing their judgments and reactions, questioning their interpretations. They developed what we might call psychological distance or mindfulness, the ability to observe your own mental processes without being completely caught up in them. You can practice this too. When an anxious thought arises, you can notice, there's an anxious thought. Not I'm anxious, but there's anxiety happening. It's subtle, but it makes a difference. It reminds you that you're not identical to your thoughts and feelings. You're the awareness that contains them. And from that place of awareness, you have choice. You can engage with the anxious thought, or let it pass. You can follow it down its spiral, or return to the present. You can believe it, or question it. This is freedom. Not the freedom to not have anxious thoughts. Those will arise. But the freedom to choose your relationship with them, to not be their slave, to observe them, learn from them, and then gently return to peace. Let your breath guide you back. Notice the gentle rhythm of breathing. In, out, in, out. This has been happening this whole time, without your conscious control. Your body knows how to breathe. It knows how to rest. You can trust it, and your mind knows how to settle too. When you stop fighting it, when you stop demanding that it be different, let it be. Let thoughts arise and pass. Let anxiety come and go. You're just resting, breathing, being. There's nowhere to get to, nothing to achieve. You don't need to fix yourself or perfect your mind. You're just practicing gently, the art of being present, the art of acceptance, the art of letting be. The Stoics would say that this practice is its own reward. You're not doing this to get somewhere or become someone. You're doing it because this is how peace is cultivated, how wisdom grows, how a good life is lived, not in achieving perfect control or eliminating all anxiety, but in meeting each moment with awareness, with acceptance, with wisdom, in choosing, again and again, to return to what matters, to what's within your power, to what's actually real. And what's real right now is that you're resting, your body is supported, your breath is flowing, you're alive. In this moment, this precious, ordinary moment that contains everything. Let the future take care of itself. It will come when it comes. Let the past be past. It's already gone. All you have is this moment, and in this moment, you're okay. You might feel your body relaxing more deeply now, the tension that anxiety creates beginning to dissolve, your muscles softening, your breath deepening, your mind slowing. This is natural. This is what happens when you stop fighting, when you stop trying to control everything, when you allow yourself to simply be. The Stoics knew about this kind of peace, not the peace of having everything go your way, but the peace of accepting things as they are. Not the peace of perfect control, but the peace of focusing on what you can influence. Not the peace of never being challenged, but the peace of meeting challenges with wisdom. This peace is available to you. It's here, now, not somewhere in the future, after you've fixed all your problems, but here, in this moment, beneath the anxiety, beneath the worry, beneath the fear. It's like the ocean. On the surface, there might be waves, storms, turbulence, but deep below, there's stillness, calm, peace. That deeper peace is always there, even when the surface is rough. You can sink into that deeper peace now. Let the surface of your mind be however it is, anxious, worried, busy, but sink beneath it, into the deeper stillness of simply being, simply breathing, simply resting. This is where you can always return. This is your refuge, not an external place, but an internal state, the inner citadel that the Stoics wrote about, the fortress of your own peaceful awareness, untouched by external storms. As you rest in this place, let the wisdom we've explored settle into you, not as facts to memorize, but as understanding that becomes part of you, the understanding that you have power over your mind, that you can focus on what you control, that you can accept what you can't, that you can live in this moment. These understandings will support you when you return to your daily life. When anxiety arises, you'll have these principles to guide you back to peace, not as rigid rules, but as gentle reminders, as trusted friends. And you can trust the process. You don't need to perfect this immediately. You can practice gradually, over time. Each time you remember these principles, each time you apply them, you're strengthening your capacity for peace. The Stoics were patient with themselves. They knew that becoming wise is the work of a lifetime. They didn't expect instant transformation. They just kept practicing, day after day, year after year. And they found that this patient practice bore fruit, not all at once, but gradually. They became calmer, wiser, more resilient. They developed a peace that external circumstances couldn't easily disturb. You can develop this too. Starting now, starting with this moment of rest, you're planting seeds that will grow into greater peace, greater wisdom, greater resilience. Let yourself rest deeply now. Let the words fade into the background. Let your awareness settle into simple being, breathing, resting, present. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to understand everything. You're just here, now, alive, resting, and that's enough. The Stoics would say that this moment of rest, this moment of peace, is a taste of what's possible, a glimpse of the tranquility that comes from living wisely, from focusing on what matters, from accepting reality. And this taste of peace can encourage you. It shows you what's available, what's possible, not someday in the distant future, but now, whenever you remember to return to these principles. So rest, let go, trust that you have within you everything you need to meet life's challenges. Trust that wisdom is available to you. Trust that peace is possible. And know that the ancient Stoics are with you in spirit, their wisdom spanning centuries to support you, to guide you, to remind you of what's true and lasting. You're part of this long tradition of humans, learning to live wisely, learning to meet uncertainty with courage, learning to find peace within, regardless of external circumstances. Rest in that connection. Rest in that wisdom. Rest in this moment. The breath moves. The body rests. The mind settles. This is enough. You are enough. Let everything be as it is. Let yourself be as you are. Let this moment unfold without resistance. Peace is here, not somewhere else, not some other time. Here, now, in this gentle moment of rest. And as you drift, perhaps towards sleep, perhaps just deeper into rest, know that you can return here whenever you need. This peace is always available. These principles are always true. The Stoics discovered something precious, that peace doesn't depend on circumstances. It depends on how you meet circumstances. And you can learn to meet life with wisdom, with acceptance, with courage. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but better each time, learning as you go, growing in wisdom and peace. Rest now. Let it all go. Trust the process. Trust yourself. Trust that you're exactly where you need to be. The anxious mind can rest. The worried heart can be still. You can be at peace, here, now, in this moment that is always new, always fresh, always offering another chance to return to wisdom. Let the Stoic wisdom hold you. Let ancient philosophy cradle you. Let the truth of these principles support you as you rest, as you sleep, as you continue your journey. You're not alone. You're not lost. You're learning, growing, practicing. And that's what life is. A practice, a journey, an ongoing opportunity to live more wisely, more peacefully, more fully. Rest in that. Rest in the present. Rest in the peace that's always here, always available, always waiting for you to return. The words continue softly, but they fade into the background now, becoming just a gentle presence, a quiet companion as you rest. You don't need to follow them anymore. You can let them be. Just sound, just rhythm, just a soft presence in your awareness. Your body knows how to rest. Your breath knows how to flow. Your mind knows how to settle. Trust these natural processes. Let go of control. Let go of striving. Let go of worry. Just rest. The Stoics are here with you. Marcus, Epictetus, Seneca. Their wisdom flowing through time to meet you in this moment. They would want you to rest. They would want you to know peace. They would want you to be gentle with yourself. And so, the words become whispers, become silence, become the quiet spaces between thoughts where peace lives, where wisdom dwells, where you can simply be. Rest, peace, breath. Now, let everything else fade. Let this moment be all there is. You're safe. you're okay. You can rest. And in this rest, in this peace, in this gentle letting go, you're practicing the deepest Stoic wisdom. Acceptance of what is, presence with what's here, trust in what's unfolding. Sleep comes, or it doesn't. Either way, you're resting. Either way, you're okay. The ancient philosophers smile across time, knowing you're learning what they learned, that peace is always here, always now, always available. Rest in that truth. Rest in this moment. Rest.